I'm going to be sharing with you how to use challenges and how to use adversity to actually help you grow and awaken deeper. Because here's the truth, is that adversity and challenges are what actually help you grow. So if you feel negative emotions in your life right now, if you're going through an adverse situation, if there's things happening right now, or at any time in your life, something negative actually happens, you have to realize that is the catalyst for awakening and growth. And it cannot be any other way. That is how it has to be, because your higher self understands that uncomfort and adversity is what helps you to grow and expand your consciousness. Now, the ego doesn't want to hear that, because guess what? The ego wants to stay comfortable. That's what the ego wants. The ego just wants to stay comfortable. It wants to stay stuck in its little box. And the last thing that your ego wants to do is to get to a higher level of consciousness. It wants to stay stuck in its current dualistic life, and it wants to stay stuck where it's at. Okay, that's what the ego wants to do. So if you're new to this channel, what I want you to do is to hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because I do post a new video every single day. Also, if you want to work with me one-on-one to let go of your ego, let go of the anxiety, reprogram your subconscious mind for success so you can automatically align with your life purpose and what it is that you're truly meant to be doing on this planet at this time, hit the link that's in the description box of this video to apply for a free consultation to see if you're a good fit for the coaching program. So the first thing I want to share with you when it comes to how to use adversity and challenges to actually grow is to understand that awakening happens in pressure. That's the only way you can awaken and grow. Pressure has to happen. There has to be some kind of adversity. Now, the ego doesn't want that, because the ego has an illusion that challenges won't arise. Now, do those challenges have to be a problem is going to be up to your ego and the mental resistance that you add to the situation. But challenges are a part of life. Challenges are going to arise, but does it have to become a problem? When you realize that it doesn't, that's when you're going to awaken. You see, pressure and challenge is inevitable. That's the nature of life. Everything is always changing. Okay, think about that. Everything is in a consistent state of change, but your ego doesn't like that, does it? Your ego wants to stay stuck in the loop of the reality that it's stuck in, the loop of the negative emotions. Guess what the ego does? And the ego falls into victim mentality. Okay, but when your higher self really steps in, you start to realize that adversity is what awakens you to the fact that your ego is resisting. You see, mental resistance to the moment is what actually creates suffering. The ego doesn't realize that. The ego is what creates the suffering. Your higher self, when you're totally aligned with the moment, connected with the oneness of who you are, there's no suffering. There may be challenges, adversity may arise, and guess what? It will arise. Look at what's happening in the world right now. Okay, there's this whole situation going on, there's this whole pandemic. If you're watching this in the future, this is when the pandemic was happening with all these things that are going on in the world. You have to realize these things are going to happen. Now, I'm saying this not to be pessimistic, not to make you scared, but just to let you know that's the reality of life. Challenges happen. The ego doesn't want to hear that. I understand if you're going through some negative situation and you don't want to be going through that. I totally get it, but realize that's a part of life, and the meaning that you associate to the situation and the labels that you put onto it is what creates the issue. Awakening happens in pressure. Okay, that's how it has to be. So when you experience a lot of pressure in your life, a lot of situations that are adverse and challenging, understand, before I go deeper into how to use that to awaken deeper, understand that's the only way to awaken. You're not going to awaken in comfort. That's not how it works. Any awakening I've had in my life has been in some sort of adversity or uncomfort or pressure. And I cannot be any other way, because that's the game of life that you signed up for. The game of life that you signed up for at a higher level, which is what I believe, is that we came here to experience life and the duality, the challenge, the density of this planet. And you're here to actually flow with life and experience all of it, the good and the bad, and also the part of it that transcends both of those things, the oneness of who you are. So understand that awakening happens in pressure, whether it be a negative emotion, right, where some negative emotion arises in your life, whether it be something collapsing in your life. That's normal. You see, everything's changing. Everything's gonna collapse one way or another. We have this illusion in reality that things are solid. Nothing is solid, okay? Your body's not solid. It's always changing. Your thoughts aren't solid. Your emotions aren't solid. Your body's gonna deteriorate one day. One day you're gonna die. All these things are gonna happen. Now, I'm not saying this to be fearful or to be pessimistic. I'm just giving you the reality to help you find empowerment and inner peace, because when you get into alignment with this truth, you can feel a lot more peace in your life. Now understand that whether it's a negative emotion, whether it's something collapsing, a business collapsing, right? You see many business owners creating success and maybe it collapses somehow, something happens. Look at what's happening in the world right now. The whole world is collapsing to some degree, right? Old systems are collapsing. Now, does that have to be a bad thing? Maybe temporarily to the ego, it will perceive that as such. But in the long run, it doesn't have to be like that. That's just what the ego thinks, is that this is bad. It puts labels. It falls into victim mentality, right? That's what the ego does. The ego falls into the victim mentality. But you got to realize that's what the ego does. The ego likes to play the victim game. It likes to play the victim role. But keep in mind, it is just a role and you don't have to choose that role. But only when you awaken, then you can realize that. Awaken to what? Awaken to the fact that your mind is creating mental resistance and the ego is what is creating suffering. So whether it's a health issue, this is so common. People have health issues. You know, I've experienced health issues, you know, that happen where they bring me closer to the awakening. It's like these things happen in our lives for a reason. I believe that nothing happens by accident. Nothing happens just like that. And no matter how negative something may seem in your life, just remember that everything happens for a reason. You can choose that meaning if you want. Or you can choose the meaning of victim too. That will become your reality. It's up to you. Or you can choose the meaning that everything happens for a reason. It's happening for you, not to you. And realize that all of these things that are happening are for a specific purpose to help you grow. Now, whether you realize that meaning or not, whether you choose that meaning or not, doesn't matter. Either you're going to realize this or the universe will forcefully push you into adversity and help you awaken. That's kind of what's happening on the planet right now. Is people are awakening forcefully. But when you understand that's how it works, you can actually prepare yourself. So once again, whether it's a health issue, something collapsing, a business, something collapsing in your life, an old relationship, a struggle happens where your ego's struggling and resisting life, whether it's a negative emotion, strong negative emotions. These things are the foundation required to awaken. When you awaken to the fact that your ego doesn't have to play the victim role any longer, it's just a role. That's all it is. It's not truth. It's not the truth. It's the fiction that your mind tells you. This is what Eckhart Tolle always says. There's the actual situation and there's the mental narrative to that situation. There's the narrative that the mind creates about the situation. And then what you can awaken to is to realize that the situation is the situation, but the narrative is what creates most of the suffering, if not all of the suffering. Okay, I believe it creates all of the suffering because I've experienced certain situations in my life that were very adverse, maybe things with family, maybe things with my health. And then what happened was when I turned off the mind and I connected so deeply to that adversity, that is what helped me have a deep connection to the moment and learn that the mind creates the suffering. And what I'm saying right now, the ego is going to get completely triggered. Completely triggered. I get that. But your higher self knows that's true at the deepest level. Your heart resonates with this, not your mind or your ego. The more that you try to understand this with the mind and the ego, it's not going to work, because that's what's creating the suffering in the first place. So the second thing I want to share with you is to become comfortable with the uncomfortable. The first thing, just to clarify, was awakening happens in pressure. Okay? The second thing is become comfortable with the uncomfortable. I'll give you a perfect example of some awakening experiences that I've personally had in my life, where I realized that uncomfort equals growth. You see, I've been meditating every single day for the last 5 years. Okay, not 5 years, probably like over 4 years at this point. I don't really track the days, but just daily for a really, really long time. And what I realized is that my powerful awakening experiences happened when I was experiencing the most adversity that day. So that day was the most uncomfortable. That day I was having the most resistance. And then what I did was I meditated through that anyways, even when I didn't feel like it. And then that actually led to me having the most peaceful meditations I've had. Now, does peaceful mean that there's not going to be uncomfort? Not necessarily. When I had the breakthrough meditations, I still had uncomfort in my body. The same external phenomena was there, whether it was the health issue or whether it was, something in family, whether it was this. It doesn't really matter what happens in your life. It's the actual resistance that the mind creates. So when I was sitting there meditating, what I realized, not logically, but at an experiential level, the insight that I had was that my mind was actually creating the resistance. And the most powerful meditation that I had was when I was actually sitting there meditating and I fully accepted those feelings and those adverse situations that were happening in my life. That's what helps you to grow. I'm telling you right now, if you get this, your life will shift forever. Think about it like this. My most powerful meditations, where I had the most inner peace, was the meditations where I felt the most resistance ever. I'm not just saying like sometimes, every single time that's what happened. It's a pattern that I noticed every single time. It's not just like adversity can help you to awaken. It is the only way to awaken. So when you're sitting there meditating and you feel uncomfort, that's a beautiful opportunity to awaken to the next level. See, it's the ego resisting. That's when you're about to get to the next level. This is why people do certain plant medicines like ayahuasca or other plant medicines, because these things can help you to awaken deeper. And the ego resists the entire process until finally it lets go. But how much resistance was there before that awakening? A lot. And the ego can go through a lot of struggle until finally you surrender. And that's what happened to Eckhart Tolle. Okay, for the first 30 years of his life, he was living in what he described as, not the best reality to live in, until he awoke into the fact that his ego was creating his suffering. He said, I can't live with myself any longer. And then he realized there's the I and there's the self. And he observed that self, and then he awakened. And you got to realize that's how it works. Find me an example of somebody that went through a spiritual awakening that did not go through adversity. You won't find it. It's not going to work, because that's the only way. You see, this is not just sometimes, this is how it works. So become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Okay? Become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Now, once again, I just want to say this. Be careful, because too much uncomfort can traumatize the ego. So if the universe is forcing you to deal with uncomfort, well then there you go. Use it as an opportunity to awaken. But if you're doing this intentionally, like you're trying to go to the gym, no pain, no gain, or you're doing a 10-day Vipassana meditation retreat and your ego is not ready for that, that can actually have the opposite effect. Now I'll get into that in another video, but just be mindful of the fact, if you're intentionally trying to spiritually grow yourself using meditation, do something realistic. Meditate 20-30 minutes a day. Don't do a 10-day Vipassana retreat if you're not ready for it, because your ego is going to go through a lot of resistance. This is what meditation really is you go intentionally into uncomfort and then you surrender into the mental resistance. That's what meditation really is. That's what meditation is teaching you. It's teaching you to remove the narrative that your mind is thinking while you're feeling the negative feeling, right? You're meditating, your leg goes numb, remove the narrative. Be with that feeling. You have a negative feeling in your body, be with that feeling. That's what meditation is about. But you do that too much, then you stop meditating for years. That's what the ego does. So be careful. You might have a strong ego backlash. Ego backlash is when you push the ego so hard, it doesn't have an awakening, and then it just goes back to where it was in the beginning, or even lower than when it started. Okay, so either your ego will awaken and you'll go through to the next level, or you'll just drop back down and you'll stop meditating and you'll stop trying to grow yourself. So just be mindful of that, but become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Remember, that's how you grow. So if your meditations become too comfortable, add 10 minutes to your meditation, right? If you're too comfortable into your life, if you're too comfortable in your life, do something bold. Do something bold. Do something that your ego is not comfortable with. This is how you grow. Now, this can sound intimidating to some people, which is why I'm planting the seed and to say, hey, be careful, don't push your ego too hard. Now, at the same time, if you don't push your ego enough, you don't grow either. So how do you find that middle way? Well, I can't share that in this video. That's a whole separate topic, but that's for you to decide, to find that middle way where you're pushing your ego enough, but you're not pushing it too hard. But this is only if you're intentionally trying to grow yourself. This video is more about situations in life that come that we don't necessarily choose, that you can use to actually awaken deeper, which takes me to the third point in this video, which is change the meaning to adversity. Change the meaning. You see, the ego creates this narrative that things are happening to it. But the narrative that I choose, if any narrative at all, because I try to remove narratives from my life and connect to the actuality of the moment and what the truth of the moment is beyond the concepts of my mind. But if you're going to have any meaning at all, well, then choose a meaning that serves you, okay? Falling into victim mentality does nothing. Falling into this whole victim mind state doesn't help you grow. It just keeps you stuck in the loop of whatever you're experiencing. That's all it does. Have you ever realized that? Have you ever realized that falling into victim mentality doesn't help you get out of that situation and that it only keeps you stuck? Now, I understand it's not easy to go through that situation. I get it, but you gotta agree with me here that falling into a victim mentality doesn't help you to get rid of that situation. It only keeps you stuck. And the ego has this illusion that thinking and falling into victim and complaining is what gets you out of that, but that never works, does it? So change the meaning. Realize that you have a choice to ask yourself, why is this situation actually happening? Like, why is this happening to me? Think about that. Just, if you have a situation happening, realize that the universe is always teaching you a lesson. So just think about it like this. Why is this happening to me right now? Am I supposed to learn some lesson from this? I believe that the universe teaches us lessons and that things happen in divine synchronistic timing. But if you don't believe in that, that's okay. Why would you still not associate that meaning to a situation? That's what's going to be the most practical as well, right? I believe that things happen in divine timing and happen for a reason. If you don't resonate with that, that's okay. Why would you have any other meaning anyways? See, from a divine universal perspective, I think that the universe is teaching us lessons and that things happen for a reason. But if you don't believe in that, still understand from the most practical and logical perspective, victim mentality does nothing. So I could explain it to you from a spiritual perspective and a more esoteric perspective, but also from a practical and logical perspective, the victim mentality does nothing. So change the meaning. What is that situation teaching you? Why is this adversity happening in my life? Ask yourself that question. What is the meaning to this that I'm associating with? Like, what meaning am I associating to this situation? And can I change that? Can I change the meaning that I'm associating with the situation? Can I actually have a positive meaning where I can see that this is happening for me and helping me grow? You can choose these meanings. Even go back to a situation that you had in the past in your life where something was traumatizing. Go back to that memory and ask yourself, can I change that meaning? Like, if you're bullied, you had some traumas, you had some situations. We all do. Who doesn't have trauma? Nobody. Everybody goes through something. Go back and change the meaning. That happened for this reason so I could grow. If that didn't happen, then I wouldn't be the person that I am today. You see, I believe those things happen for a reason. Once again, if you don't believe in that, that's totally cool. It doesn't change the power that this video can have on your life. The key is to realize that victim mentality does nothing and the ego blocks you from growing in your life. Okay, so just to clarify what I shared with you in this video, number one, awakening happens in pressure. Okay, whether you have a negative emotion in your life or a negative situation or something collapses or a health issue arises, realize that awakening happens in those moments in your life. Okay, example I gave as well is if you're meditating and you have extreme uncomfort, use that to go deeper into your meditations. That pressure is what creates the growth. The second thing I shared with you is become comfortable with the uncomfortable. Become comfortable with it. Just have this desire to go into uncomfort sometimes, to actually step into that adversity. Have a little bit of, get curious. Get curious with the uncomfort. Don't be so scared. Don't be so scared of the uncomfort. Get curious with it. The third thing is change the meaning. Okay, change the meaning to adverse situations. So if you have any narrative at all, I would invite you, this is how I live my life, this is what works for me, but I'm not telling you what to do, but I would invite you to have no narrative at all and separate the narrative that you have of the situation to the actual, like experience the situation for the truth of what it actually is. Realize that your narrative is just a narrative and the situation is a situation, okay? That's what I would invite you to do. But if you're gonna have any narrative at all, why not create a positive narrative where things are happening for you, right? You can choose that narrative. You can choose that. You can change your story, right? Realize that your narrative in this story was what created the suffering. Once you realize that, now guess what happens? You can change that narrative to what you prefer to experience instead. And that's part of awakening as well. And that's when you realize you also create your reality, which then takes you to the next level of awakening, but that's not something I can get into in this video. So that's all I have for this video. Once again, if you want to work with me one-on-one to reprogram your subconscious mind, align with your life purpose so you can live the life that you really want to live, hit the link that's in the description box of this video to apply for a free consultation to see if you're a good fit for the coaching program. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share it with a friend, leave a comment down below, maybe sharing your adverse experiences. I would love to hear it. That helped you to awaken, and share with us, share with the community. I'd love to hear it. Have yourself a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.